college football player props here on PrizePicks for Saturday, November 4th. Before I get started, link in the description below. Hop into the premium Discord. 31 cents per day, $9.30 per month. It's where I post all the plays I'm making on PrizePicks. We also have other premium cappers in there as well that post all of their plays, research, and analysis. Super positive community. Everyone in there just trying to help each other cash. I also want to mention that I'm not a gambling expert and this is not financial advice. These are simply plays I'm personally looking at making. Hopefully give you guys some insight and analysis to make your own player prop decisions here. Again, no one is pressing submit on those parlays other than yourselves. But let's get into it, you guys. 2 college football player props here for this. I think this is honestly a very nice slate overall. Saturday, November 4th. Let's not waste any time. Let's just get right into it. Both these plays are going to be quarterback fantasy score plays. And both these plays I actually gave in the Discord at the time of this video, probably like almost 24 hours ago. So again, let's not waste any time. Let's just get right into it. The first one's going to be Dylan Gabriel over 25.5 fantasy score. Dylan Gabriel, I think, should be a Heisman finalist when the end of the year does come. He's over this line in 3 of his last 4 games. One miss coming against UCF when he finished with 23.32. But the 3 overs have been pretty well over. 41.34 against Iowa State. 32.7 against Texas, and then 30.4 last week against Kansas, which if you watch that game was a super weird game overall for Dylan Gabriel and the entire Sooners offense. But we take a look at this matchup. This is obviously a rivalry game. 62-point over-under. Now the over-under has actually moved up. This was a 61 over-under. 62 over-under with it. Oklahoma is actually being 6-point road favorites in this matchup. Now Oklahoma State is a pretty good team as well. I think they're like 6-2 on this season, so this being a rivalry game, it should be a pretty fun game to watch. We look at Dylan Gabriel, right? Like I said, should be a Heisman finalist. He's over this line of 25.5 fantasy score in 6 of 8 games of the season, with, again, 2 misses coming with 23.3 fantasy and 25 fantasy flat for Dylan Gabriel. But we take a look just last week, like I said, against Kansas, right, which he finished with 30.2 fantasy. He only threw for 171 yards in the air and threw no passing touchdowns. Actually, the majority of his fantasy points came on the ground, 64 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And I definitely think we're not going to see the same sort of offense that Oklahoma had. They were obviously super stagnant offensively and couldn't really get things going overall in that game. But we take a look at Dylan Gabriel. Current odds, he's minus 145 to score a rushing touchdown in this game against Oklahoma State, which obviously positively correlates to his fantasy score line. We take a look at this article here on 247 Sports talking about how Dylan Gabriel's been preparing for this matchup and how his teammates have been talking about him. So Dylan Gabriel eyes bounce back in Bedlam after Kansas loss rubbed him the wrong way. You can see here, who could blame him? The 5th-year senior had an uncharacteristic day in his team's 38-30 loss at Kansas, attempting just I want to pause this video. Attempting just 19 passes without a touchdown, throwing an early pick 6 on the road while also rushing for 3 touchdowns. Bizarre final stat line, the Heisman hopeful, 14 of 19 passing, right? Like only 19 pass attempts for Dylan Gabriel when he before that had 5 straight weeks of 30 plus pass attempts. So I definitely think they're going to get back to that. Most irksome stat of all was the one sitting in the loss column. Obviously the first loss of the season for Oklahoma. Wide receiver Drake Stoops says he's been really locked in. Usually he's kind of charismatic, real upbeat. He's just been a little bit more conservative. I say he's detailed, he's ready to go. I think everything rubbed him the wrong way, so it's good to see that our quarterback, our leader of the team, just seeing his distaste in his mouth. And you can see here, Oklahoma State, horrible secondary, right? 92nd in the nation in passing defense, allowing 238.9 yards per game through the air. The Cowboys are also 91st in pass efficiency defense, 140.6, and 101st in yards allowed per pass attempt, 7.9. They've also given up their fair share of explosive plays this season, surrendering 31 plays of 20-plus yards through 8 games, which is 108th amongst FBS teams. Now we look at Oklahoma State, right? They are giving up the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position per game at 24.5 fantasy points is what they're giving up to the position. Right, they're giving up, like I said, the 5th most total passing yards, as well as the most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks in the Big 12. The most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks is the matchup that Dylan Gabriel gets. Oklahoma State also the second most rushing yards to the quarterback position as well. Now we look at other quarterbacks and how they've kind of faced against Oklahoma State. Like I said, a 61 over-under. Vegas projecting a shootout here. We look at Jason Bean against Oklahoma State. 410 in the air and 5 passing touchdowns. Also had 2 rushing yards, but 410 and 5 passing touchdowns. We look at Garrett Green, who's not the talent that Dylan Gabriel is. 249 in the air, 2 passing touchdowns. Also had 117 on the ground. He absolutely went crazy. So, like, both these guys, Garrett Green here finished against Oklahoma State 31.7 fantasy. And Jason Bean finished with, against Oklahoma State, 37.6 fantasy. So it's just a nice line for Dillon Gabriel. I think last week his fantasy score line was at 28.5, so we get him at 25.5 here. I think in a great game environment on the road, should be shootout. I like the over on this one. The second one's going to be another fantasy score prop. It's going to be Caleb Williams over 28.5 fantasy score. For Caleb, this line is just a little too low in what honestly is the highest over-under that I've seen so far this season in college football. So Caleb had these two rough games here. Notre Dame, he finished with 8.16 fantasy, and then Utah finished with 18.94. I think you can chalk both these games. Besides that, 40.32 against Colorado, 33.86 against Arizona, and then last week had a game, 32.46 against Cal. Now we look at Caleb Williams, even going back earlier this season, right? Caleb Williams, 28.5 is the fantasy score line. He's over this line in 6 of 9 games of this season, right? Those 2 games against Utah and on the road against Notre Dame. And then this game, 26.9 against San Jose State, which was kind of a blowout. He only threw 25 pass attempts in that one. But this matchup here, a 77 over-under, absolutely insane, you guys. Honestly, I haven't seen an over-under that high this season. 77 over-under, Washington is 3-point favorites here, and this is a home game for USC. And why I think this game is going to be an absolute shootout is, one, USC's defense is horrible. USC essentially gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position, right? So Michael Penix, the Washington offense is going to have an absolute field day. But Washington gives up the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position as well. Right, so this isn't just a Washington defense that is elite by any means, and they're also not getting to the quarterback a ton this season. I think they rank in the bottom half in the Pac-12 as far as QB pressures. They're just not able to put pressure on the quarterback, and we know Caleb Williams with a clean pocket can absolutely dominate games. We look at Washington, right, quarterbacks versus Washington kind of this season, like Ashton Daniels, quarterback at Stanford, with none of the same weapons that Caleb Williams has threw for 367 yards, 1 passing touchdown, also ran for 85 yards and a touchdown. Like just last week, Ashton Daniels versus Washington, right? Stanford is 2-6. He had 42.2 fantasy points. We look at Bo Nix, right? I think we took this player prop here, 337 yards in the air, 2 rushing touchdowns, also had 14 yards on the ground. We look at that game, Bo Nix finished with 25.9 fantasy, which again, not 28.5, but still good enough. And then Ben Finley and Sam Jackson, both these guys were able to really, really throw the ball against Washington. And then Noah Fafita, quarterback for Arizona, threw for 232 in the air and 3 passing touchdowns, which is actually good for 22.2 fantasy points. So it's a great spot for Caleb Williams, massive over-under. He's currently minus 210 to score a rushing touchdown in this game. Minus 210, you guys, to score a rushing touchdown. I really like the odds here for Caleb and Dillon Gabriel. Elite game environments, 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the entire country. Not overthinking this one, just 2 guys. If they can come out and play, and these games are shootouts, these should be easy overs. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about these 2 plays. Drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button. As always, let's cash.